لا يفرج كربا بات يضنينا ويزرع الورد فينا والرياحينا وينشر الهدي إيمانا وموعظة فبالجهالة قد خابت مساعينا من لا يفرج كربا.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Ahlan wa sahlan wa marhaban bikum. Welcome to another edition of Friday Night Live with myself, Sulaiman Rawat. Another gathering, yes. Another congregation, if you like. Another sitting, another majlis, as some people would term it. Not in the physical sense, where people sit down and they have a gathering and they talk about Allah and His Rasul. They talk about issues that affect Muslims, that affect our community, that affect our day-to-day lives. This is a gathering of a different sort, where we're gathering over the airwaves, but we are gathering nonetheless. And perhaps we should check our intentions from the onset. Myself, the speaker, as well as you, the viewers out there, that we sit down tonight and we talk about Allah and we talk about Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We talk about the deen of Allah solely, only, and exclusively for the pleasure of Allah. And if we make that intention up front, inshallah, as per our intention, Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala will reward us, but Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala will also grant us benefit as per our intention. So hopefully by making the correct intention and by making the right intention up front, Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala will grant us tremendous benefit, inshallah. The privilege and honor is all mine. I'm grateful to you out there for tuning in once again and for viewing this particular program. To be granted an opportunity to talk about Allah, to talk about Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to talk about the deen of Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala is indeed a profound and a great bounty and ni'mah of Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala. And may Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala continue to bless me with this bounty and continue to enable me to fulfill the rights of this particular duty and responsibility. And may Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala grant us all the ability, inshallah, to take benefit from these discussions and from these programs. Another week is passed. May Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala accept the good that we have done. May Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala forgive whatever shortcomings there were, whatever weaknesses there were. In the end of the day, we are human beings. We are prone to falter. We are prone to error. Kullu bani Adam khatta'un wa khayrul khatta'in at-tawwabun. Every son of Adam is a sinner, but the best of sinners are those who turn to Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala in repentance. I read a beautiful tweet during the course of the week. I can't remember the exact wording. It just comes to mind now, but I'll share the gist of it with you, where one scholar wrote that courage is not always this loud roar that's telling you, do this and do that when you are on top of things and when things are going with you and when the wind is behind your back and when everything is flowing in the direction that you want it to flow. Courage sometimes could be that small whisper in your ear after you have fallen, that never mind, tomorrow we try again. Tomorrow we try again. And one alim has so beautifully said that courage is a thing, the more you utilize it, the stronger it becomes. So we fall and we slip and we falter and we fall into error. We should not do so intentionally. We should try our utmost to abstain. But every day we've got to pick ourselves up and we've got to say, you know what, unfortunately I committed that sin again. Unfortunately I fell into that error again. But courage is that we must continuously stand up. Every time we slip, we continuously stand up. And that's the mercy of Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala. Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala is prepared to repeatedly forgive, to repeatedly overlook, to repeatedly give us chance after chance. Even the most compassionate mother, even the mother who loves the child intensely and deeply, she gives a chance and a chance and a chance, and after a few years she'll say, enough. But Allah never says enough. Allah never says enough, because the forgiveness of Allah and the mercy of Allah and the clemency of Allah and the tolerance of Allah has no limit. It has no restriction. Obviously it doesn't mean we must take advantage. Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala has favored us with so many bounties, and we should try and inculcate within us the love of Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala. May Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala make us from amongst those who truly, genuinely and really love Him. Ameen ya Rabbal Alameen. Coming up this evening on the program, inshallah, first up our Tafseer slot. We were discussing the incident of Musa alayhi salatu wassalam and the Banu Israel and the instruction of Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala for them to reclaim the blessed land, the ancestral land. And what transpired, we discussed 2 verses in that regard. Today we'll discuss 2 more verses, and then next week inshallah we'll discuss the final 2 verses. It's an entire ruku from Surah Al-Ma'idah in the 6th juz of the Quran. Then after that we'll move on to our story for the week inshallah. Last week we spoke about the angel of death, Malakul Maut, was going up with the soul, and the other angels asked him a question, and the realization that dawned upon him after that. Also, this week we will be sharing a story with regards to the great Khalifa Umar bin Abdul Aziz rahimahullah, who is generally known as the fifth rightly guided Khalif. We'll go on to our marital segment. Last week we shared a tip pertaining to how to handle differences between husband and wife and ensuring that you never let it play out in front of the children. And as always, we conclude the program, inshallah, with the Sunnah segment, something practical, something for us to take forward, and something that we can implement immediately. May Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala grant us the tawfiq and the ability, inshallah.
من ذا يفرج كربا بات يضنينا من ذا يفرج كربا بات يضنينا.
Welcome back to Friday Night Live. We now move on to the Tafseer segment, and last week we discussed verses 21 and 22 of Surah Al-Ma'idah, where Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala talks about that incident where He had issued an instruction via His Nabi, Musa ala nabiyyina wa alayhi salatu wasalam. Just to bring you into the picture once again, for those who perhaps did not view last week's program, and also to refresh the memories of those who did watch last week's program. Musa alayhi salatu wasalam, Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala saved him and the Banu Israel from the tyranny of Pharaoh. And the Pharaoh was drowned in the sea, and the Banu Israel were now liberated from slavery and the torture of Pharaoh, and they became the owners of the wealth of the Pharaoh, and they got now his kingdom, etc. And after that, Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala had instructed the Banu Israel via Musa alayhi salatu wasalam to go and claim Al-Ardul Muqaddasa, to go and claim the ancestral land. And when they went there, then they refused to comply with the instruction of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. I gave you the story in brief last week, and I gave you the gist of the story, and then we took a look at the first verse, the first two verses. In the first verse, Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala mentions, وَإِذْ قَالَ مُوسَى لِقَوْمِهِ يَا قَوْمِ اذْكُرُوا نِعْمَةَ اللَّهِ عَلَيْكُمْ. Musa alayhi salam adopted strategy. He didn't issue the instruction first. He first reminded them of the many bounties of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala upon the Banu Israel. That remember the favors of Allah upon you. Then he made mention of the spiritual favors. إِذْ جَعَلَ فِيكُمْ أَنْبِيَاءَ. Allah granted you, O Banu Israel, the most anbiya from any nation, the most amount of prophets from any nation. وَجَعَلَكُمْ مُلُوكًا. Allah granted you kingship, He granted you rulership. You were the slaves of the Pharaoh, and now you have become the rulers of his kingdom. وَآتَاكُمْ مَا لَمْ يُؤْتِ أَحَدًا مِنَ الْعَالَمِينَ. From both a spiritual as well as a material sense, you have been blessed in many ways, in a manner that no other nation has been blessed. So Musa alayhi salam first reminded his people that Allah has really blessed you. Allah has really been kind to you. Now after mentioning to them the favors of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, Musa alayhi salatu wasalam now reminds them that this is the instruction of Allah. Ya qawmi dkhulu al-ard al-muqaddasa التي كتب الله لكم ولا ترتدوا على أدباركم فتنقلبوا خاسرين. That, O my people, enter Al-Ardul Muqaddasa. Go and take control of Al-Ardul Muqaddasa. And we explained in detail last week what was Al-Ardul Muqaddasa, the blessed lands. And we said the majority of the ulama conclude and they say the whole area of Sham is blessed. That includes Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, Palestine. The most blessed city in Sham is Al-Quds, Baytul Maqdis, Jerusalem. And the most blessed site in Al-Quds is Al-Aqsa al-Mubarak, the Haram Sharif area within those four walls. So the Banu Israel were instructed, but they refused. But even when issuing this instruction, firstly Musa alayhi salam reminded them of the favors of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. Then after reminding them of the favors of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, he tells them this is the instruction of Allah. But then he reminds them, listen, Allah has decreed it for you. Allah has decreed it for you. If Allah has decreed it for you, it means that you will be victorious. So whilst issuing the instruction, Musa alayhi salam is also giving them hope. But then you give hope to encourage, but you also warn about the consequences if you fail to comply. وَلَا تَرْتَدُّوا عَلَىٰ أَدْبَارِكُمْ فَتَنْقَلِبُوا خَاسِرِينَ. If you're going to turn away from this command of Allah, you're going to end up losers. You are going to end up losers. Now, we move on to the next two verses which we are going to discuss as part of tonight's discussion. The story you know, because we discussed the story last week. They refused to comply and how Allah punished them. But now we look at it from the perspective of the verses and the different dimensions that come to the fore by discussing the tafsir of these verses. The Banu Israel objected. What did they say? قَالُوا يَا مُوسَى. They said, O Musa, إِنَّ فِيهَا قَوْمًا جَبَّارِينَ. This ancestral land, this holy land that you want us to reclaim, there is a very tyrannical, very strong, very aggressive nation that lives there. وَإِنَّا لَن نَدْخُلَهَا حَتَّى يَخْرُجُوا مِنْهَا. Listen, we only prepared to go there. We know it's the instruction of Allah to go, but we only prepared to go there if they are not there. فَإِن يَخْرُجُوا مِنْهَا فَإِنَّا دَاخِلُونَ. If they come out, we'll go. But as long as they are there, hey, we don't want to interfere with them. Now what's the backdrop here? The ulama say that when Musa alayhi salam came close to Al-Quds, he sent, we have discussed previously, the Banu Israel had 12 tribes, and each tribe had a leader. Each tribe had a chief. So he sent the 12 chiefs, the 12 leaders of the 12 tribes, on a fact-finding mission. Now, who was residing there? As I have explained last week, the Amalika tribe were residing there. So when Musa alayhi salam, or when the 12 chiefs came to the gates of the city, the Amalika tribe was so forceful, so strong in their physique, that when these 12 gentlemen came, one man arrested them. He got an impression, he got an indication that they've come here to spy. So he arrested them. Ace out, one out. He arrested all 12. And after he arrested all 12, he took them to the leader. And he said, I suspect they've come on a fact-finding mission. These people have intentions of attacking here. They have intentions of taking over here. So the leader was about to have them executed. But then he reached a deal with the 12 leaders. And he said, listen, I'll spare your life on condition you go back to your people and you tell them that, listen, hey, we went on the fact-finding mission. But these people are strong people. These people, you don't mess with them. These people are really clued up and geared up. So the 12 came back and they mentioned to Musa alayhi salatu wasalam, and they said that this is what we saw and this is what we witnessed. So Musa alayhi salam warned them, and Musa alayhi salam issued a instruction to them that, listen, this does not deter me and it should not deter you, because Allah has instructed us. We don't worry about the instruction of a human when it comes to the instruction of Allah. Allah has instructed us to go and to take possession of this place. And Allah has promised us that if we comply to the instruction of Allah, Allah will grant us victory. So don't worry about the physique and the might. Don't worry about the strength and the military power of these people. Go do what Allah tells you to do. And my fear is, if you're going to share your experience with your tribes, people are going to become afraid and it's going to create problems. So rather keep it quiet. Rather keep it quiet. Now they made the fundamental error. The error that most of us also make. Sometimes when we're supposed to keep something quiet, we say, no, I'll just tell it to one person. You know, my best friend, my confidant, my right-hand man. So you tell it to one person, who tells it to one person, who tells it to one person. So from the 12 chiefs of the 12 tribes, 2, Yusha bin Nun and Caliph bin Yuqinna, these 2, they complied with the instruction of Musa alayhi salatu wasalam. And they kept their mouths zipped, totally sealed. But the other 10, they told 1 or 2 people who they thought were very close to them, who in turn told 1 or 2 people, and before long, their tribes knew, and the tribes of those 2 leaders who kept quiet also they knew. So what did the Banu Israel do? They started saying, making ridiculous statements. That if only we drowned in the sea with Pharaoh, if only we didn't have to see this day. Sometimes this happens with the psyche of a nation that was under oppression for a prolonged period of time. They can't see the bigger picture. Musa alayhi salatu wasalam had told them that if you comply with the instruction of Allah, Allah is promising you victory. But no, they started saying, if only we died with Pharaoh, he was better, his punishment was better than what we would go through here. And this is when they made the statement that we are discussing in this verse here. Ya Musa, inna fiha qawman jabbarin. That, oh Musa, this is a very tough, very strong, very mighty, very tyrannical nation. وَإِنَّا لَن نَدْخُلَهَا حَتَّى يَخْرُجُوا مِنْهَا فَإِن يَخْرُجُوا مِنْهَا فَإِنَّا دَاخِلُونَ. We're not going to go if they're there. Only when they leave, then we will go. Now 2 people stood up and they tried to reason with their people. They tried to reason with the Banu Israel. Who were the 2? The same 2 leaders, the same 2 chiefs who obeyed the instruction of Musa alayhi salam and didn't inform their people. Yusha bin Nun and Caliph bin Yuqinna. Yusha bin Nun later on became a Nabi after the demise of Musa alayhi salatu wasalam. So in the next verse, Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala says, قَالَ الرَّجُلَانِ 2 people stood up. 2 people stood up. And Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala makes mention of 2 qualities of these 2 men. The 2 men I've already explained who they were. قَالَ الرَّجُلَانِ مِنَ الَّذِينَ يَخَافُونَ أَنْعَمَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِمَا. So they had 2 qualities. Allah describes them in 2 ways. Number 1, they were both fearful, and number 2, Allah had blessed them. Allah had blessed them. So what does it mean that they were fearful? The ulama of Tafseer have explained and said that here the Banu Israel were fearing a tribe. They were fearing human beings who had strong physique and who had physical power. By describing these two people who tried to uphold the command of Allah and reason with their people, by describing them as fearful, Allah Ta'ala is indicating that they feared no one but Allah. And the lesson here is that the Banu Israel ought to have feared Allah. That Allah has issued an instruction. Why are you listening to human beings? Allah has issued an instruction. Why are you listening to your nafs? And why are you allowing yourself to become cowardly? Put the instruction of Allah above everything else. Fear only Allah. So Allah Ta'ala describes them as those who are fearful, meaning they feared only Allah. And that's a lesson we need to learn in our lives. You don't fear human beings. You don't fear that which is the creation of Allah. Fear the Creator who controls all of those that are in the creation. That is the hallmark of a believer. And then Allah Ta'ala mentions, أَنْعَمَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِمَا. Both of them had been blessed by Allah. Why? Because whatever good quality you possess, whenever you were able to make a right decision, that is only because Allah had blessed you. If you look at them, they were human beings like the other 10 chiefs who went against the instruction of Musa a.s. and divulged the information. They were just human beings like them. They had exactly the same body and the same structure and everything. Then they were also chiefs. They were also enjoying the company of Musa alayhi salatu wasalam. So in every aspect they were equal. But Allah had blessed them and granted them the tawfiq. So they were the two that were able to uphold the command of Musa alayhi salatu wasalam, whereas the remaining 10 were not able to uphold the command of Musa alayhi salam. So what is the lesson that we learn from here? The ulama tell us, whenever you are able to do something and others are not able to do it, don't become proud, don't become conceited. Say, look, I'm lucky that Allah has made it easier for me. I am lucky that Allah has blessed me to a greater extent. أَنْعَمَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِمَا. So it's nobody's personal accomplishment. It is because Allah has truly blessed those people. So what did they say? The verse tells us they stood up and they tried to reason with their people. قَالَ رَجُلَانِ مِنَ الَّذِينَ يَخَافُونَ أَنْعَمَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِمَ ادْخُلُوا عَلَيْهِمُ الْبَابِ فَإِذَا دَخَلْتُمُوهُ فَإِنَّكُمْ غَالِبُونَ وَعَلَى اللَّهِ فَتَوَكَّلُوا إِن كُنتُم مُؤْمِنِينَ. They tried to reason with them. Oh people, go and enter. Go and fulfill the instruction of Allah. When it comes to the instruction of Allah, you don't look at anything else. When Ibrahim a.s. was told, slaughter your son, no reason, no logic, no philosophy, nothing. It's the instruction of Allah, I must comply. So you go and comply with the instruction of Allah. فَإِذَا دَخَلْتُمُوهُ فَإِنَّكُمْ غَالِبُونَ. Allah has already promised you that just do what I tell you and I'll grant you victory. Do you doubt on Allah? وَعَلَى اللَّهِ فَتَوَكَّلُوا إِن كُنتُم مُؤْمِنِينَ. Have reliance on Allah if you are true believers. If you are true believers, you need to have tawakkul and reliance on Almighty Allah. And again, in that is a great lesson for us. Sometimes we feel, no, I know the Sharia says I mustn't do this, but I have to do it. This circumstance, that circumstance, Trust on Allah. Do what Allah wants you to do. No matter how unfavorable the conditions, and you will succeed. That is the promise of Allah Ta'ala. It was the promise to the Banu Israel, it was the promise to the Adi Anbiya, it was the promise to Sahaba, it's the promise to every believer up to the day of Qiyamah. Do what Allah wants you to do and Allah will be with you, no matter what the circumstances are. There's one point I want to mention with regards to these two individuals who stood up, these two chiefs and leaders, and tried to reason with their people. Although they were unsuccessful, then too you have to acknowledge that it is a huge accomplishment and it takes a great degree of courage to be able to stand up and speak against public sentiment. When everybody feels one way, all the Banu Israel are saying, no, we don't want to go. And now as a leader, a true leader is, you must be able to say that which is right. You must be able to guide your people to that which is right, even if it's unpopular. That's the sign of a true leader. Today you see politicians, what they do. If they say, hey, public sentiment is against this, no. We'd rather stay away from it. It will affect our campaign. It will hurt us at the ballot box. That's not a true leader. When you know the best interest of your people is that you must do a particular thing, even though they don't realize it, and they might rebel against you if you try to indicate it to them. A true leader is a person who will be able to tell them. Yes, how you tell them, diplomacy, the right way, the right time, the right manner, obviously that is all important. So it's really a good leader and a skilled leader and a sincere leader who will be able to stand up and speak against the flow of the prevailing sentiment at that particular time. and be able to tell people, what you are saying and what you are feeling and how you are reacting, it's wrong. This is what Allah wants from us, and this is how we are expected to react. So these people tried to reason with the Banu Israel. They were not successful. What transpired thereafter? What was the response of the Banu Israel to this attempt by these two individuals? That we will discuss in the coming verses in next week's discussion, inshallah. May Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala grant us the understanding. Welcome back to Friday Night Live. We move on to our story segment for the week. Last week we discussed the story that Wahab bin Munabbah rahimahullah narrates, that once Malakul Maut was ascending with the soul of someone he had just taken, and he was moving through the heavens, when the angels asked him that you take the souls of so many people, tell us, when was that one time when you had to take someone's soul, when you really felt sorry for that person and you felt real compassion? So Malakul Maut responded, the angel of death, and I explained last week the correct pronunciation is Malakul Maut. Malak means angel. Many people say Malikul Maut. Malik means king. The king of death is Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. This is the angel of death. So Malakul Maut narrated an incident, and he said, once Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala had instructed me to take the soul of a mother who had just given birth, but she and her baby were all alone in the jungle. There was no one else to take care of that baby. And at that moment, I complied with the instruction of Allah, but I felt real compassion that what's going to happen to that baby? What's going to happen to that baby? So the other angels who asked him the question, they told him, you know who that baby is? So he said, no. He said, that baby is that same person who grew up and became a very tyrannical and dictatorial ruler, a great oppressor. And that soul that you got with you now, of the person you have just taken, is that very baby whose mother's soul you had taken all those years back, alone in the jungle. At that juncture, Malakul Maut said, Allahu Akbar, Allah knows best. Allah knows best. Allah knows what Allah is doing. And the lesson we can learn from here is that, obviously, for this baby to have survived in the jungle alone, when the mother passed away, Malakul Maut took the soul, Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala would have had to make special arrangement for this baby. And Allah would have to shower His special blessings and His special favors and His special bounties. And how is it, this is what life teaches us, that those people sometimes who are really blessed by Allah and who have really received the special favors of Allah, yet they become disobedient, and yet they become oppressive and tyrannical, and yet they become so proud and conceited and arrogant and dictatorial. Sometimes even human beings, the very people who helped them, assisted them at one stage in their life, their parents, their elders, they turn their backs to them and they carry on as if they owe them nothing and as if they've accomplished everything on their strength. So Malakul Maut said, at that time I felt sorry for that baby, but now look what happened to that baby. Allah knows best how Allah decrees. The story I want to share with you this week is with regards to the great Caliph Umar bin Abdul Aziz rahmatullah alayh. And we know he was so pious that after a period of the whole moral and religious fiber of the leadership having really gone very low and stooped very low, you had that great era of the Khulafa Rashideen and the great era of Muawiyah bin Abi Sufyan radiyallahu an after that. But then the decline started. And the morally and spiritually, the leadership had reached a very low point. It was all about the luxuries that went with leadership. It was all about money and the wealth and all the different privileges. And Umar bin Abdul Aziz rahimahullah, only 2 years he ruled, but he claimed like the savior. And that's why he's referred to as the fifth rightly guided Caliph, coming from the progeny of Umar radiyallahu an. And when he took on the responsibility of Khilafat, he really made a difference in those 2 years. He effected a great degree of change in the Muslim Ummah at that time. And there are many incidents with regards to his spirituality and his great religious standing and his great piety. So the ulama have written one incident with regards to Umar bin Abdul Aziz rahimahullah. They say in his house he had a staircase. And on the staircase there was one brick that was a bit loose. So every time anybody would use that staircase, including Umar bin Abdul Aziz himself, when he would put his foot on that brick, it would wobble a bit. And then he would put it on the next brick and continue up the staircase. So one day, the servant thought to himself, maybe my master, he's got so much on his shoulders, and he's worried about the whole ummah, he's the Amirul Mu'mineen. Maybe he just doesn't get the time. It just slips his mind all the time to tell me to fix the brick and to make it firm once again. So let me just do it on my own. I mean, I don't have to wait for his instruction. So the servant went ahead and he fixed the brick and he made it solid and firm. And the next time Umar bin Abdul Aziz rahimahullah went up that staircase and he placed his foot on that particular brick, he found it was firm. So he called the servant and said, did you make it firm? Did you fix it? So the servant said, yes. Umar bin Abdul Aziz rahimahullah then told him, look, I appreciate your being proactive and you're taking the initiative, but you should have left it. The reason why I didn't tell you to make it firm and to fix it was every time I used to put my foot on that brick and it used to wobble a bit, it used to serve as a reminder to me that, oh Umar, one day you have to walk on the bridge of Sirat. One day you have to walk on the Pul Sirat. And that is a bridge beneath which is Jahannam, and the end of which is entry into Jannah. And it is thinner than a strand of hair, sharper than the edge of a sword. We have heard the description of the ulama. And the pace at which you would move across the Pul and the bridge of Sirat would be dependent on your actions. There would be those who would move across with the speed of lightning. There would be those who would stumble and fumble but still make it over. And there would be those, unfortunately, Allah forgive and Allah forbid, who would stumble and fumble and fall off into the fire of Jahannam beneath. So every time I used to put my foot on that brick that was not firm, that was wobbly, it is to remind me that one day you're going to be on the bridge of Sirat, you're going to be on the Pul Sirat. What are your actions like? Oh Omar, are you going to be wobbling there or are you going to be firm there? So therefore I would have preferred that you left that brick a little loose, so it would have been a continuous reminder for me. Now, I mean, these stories are not just there for the sake of stories. We need to then ask ourselves serious questions. We need to say, look, to what extent do we contemplate on death? The ulama have encouraged that every night before you go to bed, make muraqabah maut. Envisage, close your eyes, just try and imagine you being lowered into the grave, being left there, all forlorn, all alone, only you and your actions. Munkar and Nakir coming for reckoning. On the day of Qiyamah you have to stand. يَوْمَ يَفِرُّ الْمَرْءُ مِنْ أَخِيهِ وَأُمِّهِ وَأَبِيهِ وَصَاحِبَتِهِ وَبَنِيهِ لِكُلِّ امْرِئٍ مِّنْهُمْ يَوْمَئِذٍ شَأْنٌ يُغْنِيهِ. Everyone for himself on that day of Qiyamah. How will I answer before my Allah? How will I stand before my Allah? What will be my condition before my Allah? The more we think about it, the Nabi of Allah stood the entire night contemplating over Qiyamah. Many of the pious predecessors, they would worry, they would be concerned. They would contemplate and they would reflect. What would be my condition on that particular day? And that's what keeps you in check. That's your internal mechanism. You don't need a policeman. Today, the so-called atheists and agnostics and those who don't want to be, in their terms, bound and binded and restricted by a religion. You see, why? Because there's no inner mechanism. You can abuse the law when there's no authority there to catch you. In the privacy of your home, what you do, well, it's private life. But Islam, it creates that mechanism. Belief in the year after. Maliki yawmiddin. Already the third verse of the Quran. Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala reminds us of the day of Qiyamah, that you have to stand before Allah and you'll have to answer before Allah. And on that day, it's all control for Allah. Every day is all control for Allah. But here you have some superficial control in the sense that it's your business and it's your affairs. There you are now totally at the mercy of how Allah is going to deal with you in terms of your deeds. So we also need to remind ourselves. This served as a reminder for Umar bin Abdul Aziz. We are not on that great spiritual level that things like this serve as a reminder for us. But we need to create these reminders at least once a week at the end of the week, and then try and make it once a day. Contemplate and reflect. Muraqabah and maut, muraqabah of the day of Qiyamah, contemplation that this is what is going to happen, and that creates consciousness, and consciousness then keeps a person in check. May Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala grant us the understanding.
من ذا يفرج كربا بات يضنينا من ذا يفرج كربا بات يضنينا.
Welcome back to Friday Night Live. We now move on to our marriage tip for the week, marital tip for the week, whatever you want to call it. Marriage is an exciting thing, people. Don't let it sound something like it's very daunting and something that's very difficult. Today, if we look at the norm that has become prevalent in the world, people run away from marriage. No. I'll rather date a girl, rather bed a girl. I'll rather have a string of one-night stands But marriage, no, that's very complicated. Marriage has many positives to it. Marriage has many benefits to it that you won't find in illicit relationships, in one-night stands, in off and on relationships. Obviously, as Muslims, we know that it's haram, totally haram, impermissible. But apart from that, apart from it being totally haram and apart from it being impermissible, even if you look at it purely from advantage and disadvantage point of view, there are many, many disadvantages. So we make dua to Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala that Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala grants us the realization in that regard, because there is this fear that today, especially the upcoming generation, the young generation, young boys and girls, they should not feel that marriage is something that brings a lot of complexities to your life and a lot of problems to your life. One gets the impression sometimes, I don't want to generalize too much, but we're starting to see this come through, that young men and women just want to get married because they want to legitimize physical relation. They have needs and they're looking for avenues to fulfill those needs, so that's marriage for them. Obviously, that's an integral part of marriage. But for them, I don't want it to be hurting my conscience that I'm fulfilling my need with a person that's not halal or permissible for me. So let me get married for that reason, so that I can, fulfill my physical needs. They're not looking at marriage in that broader sense. They're not looking at marriage in terms of marriage as an institution is supposed to bring so much bliss and so much of happiness to your life. So when you don't look at it like that, it's only a vehicle for you to satisfy your sexual lust. Then that's when all complications set in, because there are much more dimensions to a marital relationship than the sexual or the intimate or the physical dimension. So that's the one aspect that we need to keep in mind. Now, the tip I shared with you last week, I said, from time to time there is some turbulence in the marriage. Husband and wife will have an altercation, they'll have some words, they'll get a bit heated with one another. That is to be expected. However, don't do it in front of the children. And I gave multiple reasons. I said, it makes the kids feel insecure. It creates a lot of tension then throughout the home. Also, when you get upset with one another, it's because you have a grievance. And when you have a grievance, it's a negative thing. And you would end up pointing out the fault of your spouse. And you don't want to point out faults of your spouse in front of the children, because then children lose respect for their parents. And one day those children will then start treating their parents in a similar way and say, yeah, you are lazy. If the husband calls the wife lazy, yeah, ma, you lazy. That's why you're asking me to do so many things, because they picked up on this from the parents. So the value of the spouse and the value of the parents then drops in the eyes of the child. And that child needs to look at the parent to get an idea of what marriage is all about, the physical example. So if you're constantly bickering and fighting in front of your children, then that's something that they're going to do with their spouses in front of their children one day as well. The tip that I want to share with you for this week is actually based on that tip of the previous week, taking it one step further. Last week we spoke about the actual argument. Don't argue and don't fight in front of your kids. Do it in the privacy of your room. And then even if you're in your room, don't scream so loud. The decibels are going through the roof, that even if the children are on a different floor in the house, they can still hear and they can still make out what you're saying. But after the argument, there's generally a period of tension. Sometimes it's a period of silent treatment. Even that should not be too much in front of the children. So mother and father are sitting on the table. Tell your mother to pass me the water. Or the mother is sitting right next to the water jug, and you ask the child who's further on that pass me the water jug. That's not correct, because that sometimes in many ways can be even worse, because now the children don't know what's going on. They don't know why the tension. They don't realize what's happening, but they become fearful. They become insecure. And also one step further I want to take this discussion, besides children. Generally, people don't have arguments and fights in front of relatives, in front of visitors. But the aftermath of it, the tension afterwards, sometimes we expose that and we manifest that because we ego, you see, we don't want to be the first. So you and your wife are not talking for a day or two because you had a bit of an argument. Now your mother comes to visit. So in front of your mother, you're giving your wife the cold shoulder. When she comes and she serves you tea, she asks, your wife comes and asks everybody want tea. She comes to you and say you want tea. No. So now what happens? Everybody gets an idea. Everybody gets an indication. Yes, something is happening. Husband and wife had it out. Husband and wife have had some altercation. That's not right. That's tantamount to airing your dirty linen in public, to washing your dirty linen in public. If you have to fake it, then fake it for the betterment of your marriage. Because many times then your spouse will get more upset that you sit and, showed bioscope here in front of your mother and them, or she went to her mother and now she's going there with a popo back. What's wrong? No, nothing's wrong. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. So everyone understands that something happened between husband and wife. That's not right. It's not good for the state of your marriage, and it's not good for the image of your marriage also. Because then it gets tongues moving, it gets people's minds moving, people start to speculate, people start to conclude, and it's not healthy overall. So this week's tip, building on from last week, do not let the after effects of an altercation that took place in marriage become obvious to your children, or to become obvious to relatives, or to become obvious to people who are visiting you, or you are visiting. May Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala grant us the understanding.
من ذا يفرج كربا بات يضنينا من ذا يفرج كربا بات يضنينا.
Welcome back to Friday Night Live. We continue now with the final segment of the program, and that is the Sunnah segment. We are still discussing the Sunnahs of eating. Last week we discussed a hadith which informs us that we should not skip the evening meal. Jabir bin Abdullah radiyallahu anhu narrates that Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, never omit the evening meal even if you have to eat a handful of dates, as omitting the evening meal speeds up old age. This narration is in Tirmidhi. And we explained, it doesn't mean that you must have a supper even if you are full. It doesn't mean that you must have an additional meal. What it means is don't go to bed hungry. Yes, if you've had a late lunch and a heavy lunch and you're already full, there's no need then to have an evening meal. Don't go and have an additional meal and say, no, it's sunnah. What it means is don't go to bed hungry. Because if you go to bed hungry, then it's going to have physical side effects. It's going to speed up old age, meaning your body will wear down and your body will become old and weak and meek at a more rapid rate. Yes, even dietitians will tell you that, what's that common saying? Breakfast like a king and lunch like a prince and supper like a pauper, as I explained last week. So that was the sunnah that we discussed last week, that don't go to bed hungry. Obviously, it doesn't mean that also now if you are hungry in the evening, you must eat the wrong types of foods. Then you consult your doctors, you consult the dietitians, the hakims, the experts. Some foods are not good to eat at night for whatever reason, medical reasons. So keep that in mind. But the general rule is don't go to bed on a hungry stomach, because that's not good for your health. And that's contrary to the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Now the sunnah that we want to discuss for this week is examining the quality of the food. Examining the quality of the food. Anas radiallahu anh relates that once dates were presented to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam examined the dates to extract any insects which may be in them. This narration is in Abu Dawood. So, old dates, sometimes it could be infested with insects. Therefore, before eating it and harming himself and killing the insects in the process unnecessarily, Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam first inspected them, and he could remove the insects and then eat the dates. So therefore, the ulama say it is permissible and it is a sunnah to examine any food or fruit regarding which one is unsure. Now, it doesn't mean you go to somebody's house and now they cooked a pot of rice and now you go and poke and prod and look in there and say, no, I'm examining the food. It's the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's being rude. That's acting contrary to etiquette. That's not the appropriate food. Where it's necessary, where there could be a possibility. So if you're eating dates, maybe you just slip the date open and make sure inside there's no insects. Perhaps a fruit, you just wipe the fruit properly. You just check, before you eat, that there's nothing wrong with that particular fruit. Where there's no need to do it, with the general food items that have just been freshly cooked and freshly prepared, there you don't go poke and prod, because that would upset the host, and that is bad manners. And as I said, that is being rude. Now these are sunnahs that we need to keep in mind. And the ideal is that every week, as we're discussing, you must be practicing these sunnahs of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But if you can't come to that particular level, at least to this level, try and get a book on sunnahs and browse through all the sunnahs of eating and try and inculcate that immediately and bring it into your life. So we bless our lives and we better our lives by bringing it closer to the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. May Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala grant us the understanding. Okay, so that brings us to the end of another edition of Friday Night Live. Time goes so quickly by, and no barakah in time these days. I hope you enjoyed the program, and if you did, please make dua for us that Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala continue to accept us for the khidmah of deen. We are dependent and we are in need of your du'as, and we'll be really appreciative of your du'as. Also, at the end of every program, I just remind you of the contact details. Jazakumullah to all those who have sent in their feedback. We appreciate the feedback, and the reason we appreciate the feedback is that it gives us an idea as to how people are receiving the program, their thoughts, their suggestions, and even constructive criticism. We welcome that. That's the only way we're going to improve. The email smr, that's Sulaiman Muhammad Rawat, smr@itvnetworks.tv, smr@itvnetworks.tv. Twitter, it's at Sulaiman Rawat, one word, no spaces in between. Sulaiman is spelled Sulaiman, and Rawat, Ravat. Facebook, it's facebook.com/Sulaiman Rawat, and the website sulaimanrawat.com. So however you prefer, email, Facebook, Twitter, whatever it is, you can send us your feedback. We really look forward to that. Keep us in your du'as, as I mentioned, and most importantly, make dua to Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala that He grants us the tawfiq of making amal, that Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala enables us and blesses us with the ability and the opportunity to practice on this deen. We hear a lot, we talk a lot, we read a lot, we know a lot. Comparatively to previous times, we know a lot about our deen, but we practice very little. That's the sad part. May Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala make us practicing Muslims, keep us good Muslims, inshallah. And if it has been decreed and if it's meant to be, we meet again next week, same place, same time. Until then, fi amanillah, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
من ذا يفرج كربا بات يضنينا ويزرع الورد فينا والرياحينا وينشر الهدي إيمانا وموعظة فبالجهالة قد خابت مساعينا وينشر الهدي إيمانا وموعظة فبالجهالة قد خابت مساعينا